Okay, it is August 9th, 2023, 2:09 p.m. For our towing task force meeting. We'll go ahead and get started. I know there's only a few of us here, but maybe more coming. Also short our attorney, but understanding is he is also coming. So we'll go ahead and start with the roll call. So we'll start with Nicole Bailey is not here. John Connolly is not here. John Hahn?
Here.
Thank you, Captain. Troy Hill is not here. Jim Howes, not here. Michael Pierce.
Here.
Thank you. Greg Prunsky is not here. Brandon Rich.
Here.
Thank you. Jeffrey Reister is not here. Nathan Riley, that is myself, I am present. And Joanne Rusha is also not here. Some of the people who are not currently here did register as a yes on the invitation to this meeting, so they may be trickling in at some point. So I did circulate the previous month's minutes, so those would be the minutes from the July 12th meeting. We obviously don't have a quorum here today, or at least not yet, so I think we can bypass the minutes for now. If we don't end up having a quorum for this meeting, perhaps we can approve those at the next meeting. Moving on to administrative items. Probably the biggest thing, and some of you may have already heard, the chair of this board, Trevor Forbes, has resigned his position on the towing task force. I actually heard about it maybe like 2 or 3 weeks ago. And so we've been trying to figure out exactly how we want to adjust to that, because obviously he was the elected chair. So I'm assuming we are going to have to elect a new chair for this group. So I was going to ask our attorney, John Roberts, to weigh in on the best way to do that. So we'll see if he pops in here in a few minutes and we can ask him about that. Oh, looks like we got another member coming in. Mr. Reister, welcome.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. So I was just advising the other members present that our chair, Trevor Forbes, resigned his position on the task force. So we are going to have to likely elect a new chair. I'm not sure the best way to do that. So we're waiting for our attorney, John Roberts, to jump in and provide a little guidance for us on that. I know we elected Mr. Forbes as the chair on our very first towing task force meeting, which was back in January of 2022. So about a year and a half ago. So yeah, we're gonna have to get somebody else to fill that role. Let's see if I had any other administrative items to cover. In the meantime, though, I'm happy to just at least run this meeting until we figure things out. Let's see.
I'm curious, are there any protocols in that regard?
Well, so the only thing we have to work off of is the statute. So the statute, oh, there's Mr. Roberts coming in. Hello, Mr. Roberts. Welcome.
Maybe this is something for Mr. Roberts. I'm thinking that we have statute, and I don't think my recollection from statute is it just doesn't address this kind of situation. And I was curious if there's general guidelines for boards and commissions for a case like this.
So, Mr. Roberts, as I was advising the other members present, between our last meeting and now, our chair, Mr. Forbes, has resigned his position on the task force to the governor's office. So we are currently chairless for the time being. So we were just discussing how to handle that. So I'm looking at it is addressed in the statute. It's under 4010.1 4033B, and it says the members shall elect a chair from amongst their membership. The chair shall set the time and frequency of the towing task force meetings, except that the task force shall meet no fewer than 2 times per year. So that's the extent to which it's addressed in the statute. So do you have any thoughts, Mr. Roberts?
Yeah, we just hold an election.
Okay.
That's pretty much it. Anybody who wants it, they can throw their hat in the ring. If somebody wants to nominate another member, that's just how that works. And you just do it like a motion.
Okay.
Okay. So follow-up question though is can we do any business without having elected a chair? Can we do something like an interim temporary chair, like have Nate as we're trying to do today, take on that role?
Like a board chair pro tem or something like that. We could. The issue is not that we don't have a chair. The issue is that we don't have quorum. So we'll need quorum to elect a chair. So that's the first step.
Okay.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, the only thing I would voice on the subject, because I know when we first started this group up back in January of last year, I believe mine was the first name that came up because I had a hand in recruiting out all the different members of this board. But I know I had mentioned at that time, and I still kind of feel the same, that I do a lot of the behind the scenes work for this task force, stuff at the department level. And so that already takes up quite a bit of my time. And so putting chair on that, I prefer to just kind of be the behind the scenes person, if anybody was thinking otherwise. But yeah, no, I'm happy to support whoever else may want to fill that role. But obviously, as Mr. Roberts indicated, we don't have a quorum, so we couldn't elect somebody new right now anyway. So that's what's going on with that. We're still short a few members so we're short a total of 3 members. We lost both of our members that represent disproportionately impacted communities. Both of them have resigned within the last few months. And now we're losing Mr. Forbes, who was not only our chair, but also the member who represents non-consensual towing carriers. So I'm still working to figure out exactly the best way to get those positions backfilled. It's actually pretty difficult to recruit people to be part of this body, just because, first of all, they have to be people who are willing to volunteer their time. But also on top of that, they fill a very narrow role as defined by the statute. So you can't just pick anybody. It's like somebody has to speak on behalf of a particular group or community. So in either an interest group or a community. So you can't just pick anybody. You have to actually really do some hard research and find these people. So it is difficult. And it probably took me at least 6 months to get everybody on the board in the first place. So backfilling 3 specific, hopefully it won't take that long, but I am in the midst of trying to figure out exactly how best to approach that. So that is what's going on right now. Mr. Roberts, just out of curiosity, since we are short 3 members, does the amount for quorum get reduced?
No, quorum is based on the total the total number of members assigned in the statute. So vacancies that reduce the number to below quorum means the board the task force just can't do business. I kind of ran into this with the Board of Nursing over in DPO. The governor, for whatever reason, was taking too much time to get somebody appointed, and we are on the verge of not being able to conduct business of a 6,000-page agenda packet, and 4,000 nurses being regulated. So that's the hard truth of it.
Okay. So yeah, I was hoping there'd be some more people popping in today. There was several people who registered as a yes, who indicated they would be here. So if we have, since it's a 14-member board, if we have 7, we have quorum. Is that correct, or is it 8?
It would be 8.
8. Okay.
Yeah, just over 50%. It has to be over 50%. So 8.
Okay. So we need 8 here, and we don't have 8. We have 5. So we need 3 more people to pop in. So anyway. All right.
Also, did I hear right that Nicole Bayless may not be continuing?
Nicole Bailey, we haven't heard from her in a while.
Okay.
So I'm not really sure what her status is. Unfortunately there's several members who have not shown up for the last several meetings. So we always are sending out emails, reminders of the meetings. Obviously we have the statutory ability to have someone else. If we can't attend, we can basically point to another individual to fill our role for that particular meeting. That's always been available. I think only one person has ever invoked that the whole time we've been meeting this past year and a half. But that's always available to anybody. If you're otherwise unavailable, you can just designate someone else and they can come for you. It's not a huge deal. We just like to know ahead of time so we can make sure we invite them and all that. So, okay. Well, that was the big part is just getting out that we have to sort out the chair issue. That's probably our most pressing concern right now. And then obviously trying to get our members to attend more frequently so we can have quorum and help with these issues. That's really all I had on the agenda for today. We also have an open discussion on the agenda. I know we had gotten into various topics in our meeting last month about things like alternatives to the CPI in regards to what the commission should be using for inflation adjustments, if that's a mechanism that the Towing Task Force wants to support moving forward. And also, I know we kind of went off into a couple other tangents about things like certain fees that can be charged, like after hours fees we discussed. Also, range of other things, 24-hour periods for storage, things along those lines. So I guess, is there anything anyone else wants to talk about? It'd be nice to talk at least for a little while, just to see if we can get some more people to come in to the point of quorum. If some other people might be showing up here within this first hour, but I leave that to the membership to decide if there's anything that anybody would like to discuss.
Well, I would like to basically re-raise the issue that I think is still yet to be addressed, which is that one of our major charges was to come up with a recommendation for rates. And one that was based in part on analyzing the difference between consensual and non-consensual rates. And I think we did not do that in our last letter, and so we have not yet fulfilled our charge. So we'd just like to raise that as something we should do when we get back on track.
Okay. Yeah, I think we could definitely make some more robust recommendations to the commission. It seems so we're right in the middle of a rulemaking right now, and I know because I'm part of it, where we are essentially going through the public hearing stage, where we are soliciting and receiving and analyzing and considering a variety of public commentary from the public. We've gotten comments filed by towing carriers, by consumers, by state legislators, even by the Attorney General's office. A lot of people have weighed in on the rulemaking we're currently undertaking. Now, to be clear, the majority of what's being addressed in this particular rulemaking is essentially modifying the commission's current rules to be a little more congruent with the House bill from last year, House Bill 221314. Obviously, because of the way that restructured certain types of non-consensual towing, we couldn't move forward with the rules that we had. We had to do not a total tear down, but there's quite a few adjustments that we had to make to our current rule structure and format to accommodate for those new statutory factors. So that's mostly what's being addressed. There has been instances in some of the hearings we've held already. We've already held 3. We're about to hold a 4th at the end of this month on the 31st. I suspect that will be the very last hearing before a recommended decision adopting the rules will be coming shortly after that. But there has been certain individuals who in previous hearings have brought up the concept of addressing rates through the lens of, hey, we have all these new statutory requirements, let's consider a rate adjustment because some of the new things we're required to do now through the new statutes is taking more time, more resources, more effort, et cetera. That was essentially put off, and it does not look like that will that will not be a part of this current rulemaking, which I suspect means once this rulemaking has been wrapped up, or maybe even before it's wrapped up, we may be seeing a petition be filed for a separate rulemaking that addresses specifically rates. So even though our report that we submitted back in November last year is part of the rulemaking in this current record for the current rulemaking, and it has been reviewed, it has been considered, all the things that the task force put in there. I think there will be another window of opportunity for the task force to have its voice heard through a likely subsequent rulemaking initiative that very well could take place even before this current rulemaking is concluded. It's really whenever the petition gets filed is when the commission either they will review it and then either accept it or reject it, depending on what's in there, depending on the arguments made, depending on what they're being asked to do. So I would suspect that something like that would be forthcoming, maybe between now and the end of the year, but maybe early next year, could be sooner. It's really whenever it gets filed. So, but based on the commentary I've heard, it seems likely that something like that will be filed at some point. So at that point is when the Towing Task Force's recommendations could really be heard, because it will potentially be a rulemaking that is specifically about rates and not much else. So since it's such a narrow window of the towing rules, that would probably be the best place for the task force to have its voice be heard in regards to whatever those recommendations end up being.
Do you have a sense of the timing as to when that separate rulemaking might happen, so that we have a sense of what our timeline would be if we're going to come up with a recommendation?
It really is variable. I mean, somebody could file a petition tomorrow and kick it off that way. I mean, rulemakings go on simultaneously all the time. And so that's not unusual. Usually they just will process it just like if there was nothing going on right now, and they'll address it on the merits of that particular filing, what the petition is asking the commission to consider, what they're asking them to do. And then once that's been considered, the commission either accepts it, or maybe they'll set it for notice and let people public comment to kind of fill out the record and help guide the commission on whether or not they should accept the petition or not. And then if they accept it, then they draft the NOPR, which is a notice of proposed rulemaking. It's essentially the order that initiates a rulemaking action. And then it usually gets referred to an administrative law judge for process. And they will set public comment hearings, set written comment periods, hear all of the both written and oral arguments, one side or the other, and then ultimately make a decision, a recommended decision on whether or not to adopt certain rules, how they should be written, what they mean. All of that goes in the recommended decision. And then at that point, there's time periods for exceptions to be filed, RRR, which is they're essentially appeals to whatever's in the recommended decision if people still are not okay with what's intended to be adopted by the commission. So it's a lengthy process, but yeah, timeline wise, it's really whenever it gets filed. Either somebody files a petition for rulemaking, or the commission can, upon its own motion, adopt a rulemaking if they think certain rules are necessary. But often it's based on a petition. So it's going to be based on whenever that happens. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen a year from now. So you just never really know.
Okay. If there's a as part of the petition, if it's to redo the rates, is there a chance that the commission would then come to us and ask for the task force views on the rate proposals?
They certainly could. I'm not sure if they would directly ask for it, but one thing that the commission is required to do as part of the statute that governs the towing task force, 4010.1403, the commission is required to submit reports to the legislature indicating whether or not, if recommendations from the task force has been provided to the commission, if those recommendations were adopted, which ones were adopted, if certain ones were not adopted, why not, things like that. So that's part of our same 403 statute, is that report that the commission has to provide. So yeah, it's possible that as part of the process, the commission may specifically and directly ask the task force, hey, can you please weigh in on this? If the task force did not do it of its own accord, they could certainly ask for that. And then it would be up to the task force to decide if they wanted to file something or how that would work. But yeah, it's really the only requirement I'm aware of is an annual report the commission provides to the legislature that if recommendations are provided to the commission from the towing task force, they have to essentially lay out what those recommendations are and describe what was adopted, what was not adopted, and why.
Okay. So I don't want to take up too much time, but it seems to me that what I'm hearing is that because of the nature of 1314 and what it has done to towers, that there's some movement to have some rates changed as a result of that and as a result of their experience. And it just seems like, at least with the legislative intent of the task force, that the natural place to have recommendations developed would be at least in parallel with the task force trying to address some of the issues that have been brought up. So I'm a little puzzled about the steps here, and also just thinking that again the task force is probably the best position to really start to try and take on these recommendations. And if we do so, just the history of last year is that it will take us a while, and so I think it would be useful at least to have a decent heads up as to any rulemaking where they're actually going to consider new rates based upon requests that new rates take into account some of the recent legislation.
Well, I mean, I certainly think, there's things we could do in the meantime instead of being more reactionary. We could do things like, do some independent research of like what other states are doing. I know earlier this month, or actually last month, I did some independent research for the commission in regards to a separate issue, but it did have to do with towing. So I was able to make some contacts in some other states and get a kind of a feel for how towing is regulated in other states. I didn't really go much into the rates discussion. However, it's pretty interesting just how differently towing is regulated in different states. So, I had conversations with people from Massachusetts, New Mexico, Illinois, New York, let's see where else, Nevada. It was like 8 or 9 different states where I was able to pin down, or at least somewhat pin down, who it was, like whether it was a state agency or something like that. In a lot of cases, it was just the Department of Public Safety in these different states. But I was able to speak with some people. Sometimes they were law enforcement officials. Sometimes they were entities that are similar to the Public Utilities Commission, but in these other states. So I was able to kind of at least get a glimpse at the differences between how things are regulated in Colorado versus in other states. And so I know back in 2015, I think it was, when the towing task force essentially came up with some pretty good rate recommendations for the commission on the structure of rates once the commission was able to expand their role in the regulation of towing beyond just non-consensual tows of 10,000 or less GVWR. And they looked to Utah for a study that was pretty intensive in regards to rates, and that's how our current rate structure got formed. We still do the flat rates for non-consensual tows, but then we came up with a different rate structure for based on weight class and all of that for non-consensual tows, but also for law enforcement order tows. And then we developed the hourly rate and all of that. That's all. Most of that is based off the way we do it now and the way we've done it for the past 7 or so years is based on the towing task force's recommendations on how to set up those rates and the structures that accompany those rates. So I don't think it hurts to look to other states and see kind of how they're handling certain things. So obviously each state is different and their economies are different and things like that. But, we've tried to draw, I think, as much information as at least we made our best shot last year to, in doing the survey and getting some data in regards to, towing carriers and their volume and things like that. So I think, taking that into consideration, but then also looking external to Colorado to kind of see how other states are doing it could be a potential option for trying to come up with whatever our recommendations or our further recommendations end up being to the commission. But I do think we should continue to work and look at those types of factors. Does anybody else have any thoughts? Captain Hahn? I thought it looked like you were getting ready to say something.
No, I'm good on my end.
Okay. Mr. Rich, Mr. Reister, any thoughts?
Nope, nothing on my end. I agree with Michael that, we need to get back to that charge, but unfortunately we have a couple hurdles before we get there.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds more like we need to figure out how to get a few members back on the committee so we can get a quorum. Otherwise, we won't be able to do anything really.
Well, yeah, nothing official. But yeah, no, like I said, I don't think it hurts to, because we're all volunteer positions here, and taking a little time to, do things like explore other states or, whatever other, things that may be on your side. So obviously we all fill a different role. So I'm here to represent the commission. Mr. Pierce, you're here to represent mobile home parks. We're all filling a very specific role. And so whatever we can bring from that role to those recommendations, I think would be helpful. And I think we've had previous discussions about that. I know we spent a big portion of last year talking about those kinds of things. But when it comes to concrete recommendations about, okay, the fees are this right now, they should go up because of X reason, or they should go down because of X reason. What in your role do you think can add to the for this reason part of it all? So those are the kind of things I know I'm thinking about, in my role as representing the commission. I think of how the commission thinks about things and, how we can tailor recommendations to something that will be able to be adopted, because we don't just want to make recommendations just to have them be rejected by the commission. We want to put something in front of them that they're going to accept and adopt. So that's part of what I see as my role, is to to make sure we get all our ideas in one place and put it together in a nice package that we can present to the commission in a way that they're going to say, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do it. So, all right. Well, I think that might be all we can do for today. I was really hoping some more members were going to jump in here to help us out, but what's everybody's thoughts on meeting again? I know this year we've kind of toyed around with, meeting every other month. And I think there was a point where we didn't have a meeting for like over 2 months. And then we had another meeting, which actually was attended to a greater degree. That was our last meeting in July. We had quite a few people here, which was nice. But what's everybody's thoughts on, meeting frequency? That's something the chair sets, but we don't have a chair right now. So what's everybody's thoughts on that? Do we want to try to meet again next month, or, do we want to shoot for further out than that? What's everybody thinking?
I would say that, it's probably imperative right now to meet next month, and between now and then really try to engage with the other members of the task force to join that discussion next month. I realize everybody's busy, even if it's for a short period of time, to try to sit down and look at the future calendar, but more importantly to figure out the chair. I think that's probably pretty critical that we at least get next month on the books with an eye toward getting as many people as we can to have a quorum, getting a chair, and then from there, I'd maybe identifying if every other month is appropriate or what. But I would certainly be in favor of us getting together next month.
Okay. If we stick to our regular schedule, then so that would end up being because we always do it on the second Wednesday of the month. So that would put us at September 13th. Does that sound all right for everybody? Same time, 2:00. Mr. Easter.
Yep.
Sorry, I just meant to do the thumbs up, but yeah, that works.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay. I'll go ahead and make a note here. I'll get this invite here sent out shortly to everybody. In the meantime, I've kind of tried to do my best to make sure that I'm giving everybody reminders and advance notice of these meetings. I tend to schedule them pretty close to when the last meeting ended, so that's usually a few weeks out. So I recognize that people forget, and stuff gets scheduled in time slots that you thought were otherwise empty, all that. But what I'll do is between now and this next meeting on the 13th, I'm going to try to take as many steps as possible to get as many of our members in as possible for our next meeting, so that at the very least we can have a new chair. Oh, and Miss Rusha.
Hello, everyone. I apologize. I got stuck in transit.
Okay. So we were discussing a few things. I'll give you just a short recap of what we've been talking about for the last 30 or so minutes. So between our last meeting and now, we had our chair, Trevor Forbes, has resigned from the task force. So we are currently chairless for the time being. We've had just kind of a generalized discussion in this meeting just about things we're kind of anticipating. We're right in the middle of a commission rulemaking right now that adopts a lot of the stuff from the House bill from last year for towing. And while the topic of rates has come up as part of it, it doesn't seem to have gained much traction. And so as a result, we're kind of expecting that at some point in the near future, and maybe it'll be after this current rulemaking has concluded, or maybe it'll be before it's concluded or after it's done, whenever it comes in, it sounds like the rate issue is most likely going to be addressed in a separate rulemaking that will be taking place after the current rulemaking. So we have some time, I think, in order where we can develop maybe some more robust recommendations, kind of using our report from last year as a springboard to come up with some more robust rate suggestions in regards to a variety of factors, including, what the rate should actually be and why, whether or not the inflation adjustment is an appropriate mechanism. If so, maybe something other than the CPI, things like that. I think we can put in those kind of recommendations. And this other rate specific rulemaking would probably be the most appropriate place to do that. Even though our report from last year is part of this current rulemaking, and it has been reviewed, has been considered. When it comes to the actual rates, this other rulemaking that likely will be taking place in the near future may be the most appropriate place. It's where the voice of the task force, I think, can be heard to a greater capacity. So anyway, that's what we've discussed. We decided to schedule our next meeting for kind of keeping our on track for our regular scheduling for next month, which would be September 13th. I just advised that between then and now, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that as many members as possible attend that meeting, so that at the very least we can elect a new chair. So we need a quorum to do that. So we need a big chunk of our membership to attend one singular meeting in order to accomplish that. Mr. Pierce.
If I may, just a suggestion of getting people to attend, and it's also something I'm very interested in. And now that I've heard that you've done some research in other states, how they've been regulating towing, I would be super interested in trying to set up an advanced agenda. And this is where I'm just kind of curious whether you can do that, not being the chair. I would love it if we could, just as a group, at least say that this would be a good agenda. Nate, you said you've got some research done. Ms. Rusha, I believe you've done some research in other states' rates. I would love to see just a summary of each of your researches on those, and perhaps if there are any links to tables that compare states or anything of that sort. Just out of sheer interest, I think that might attract more participation. Just because my sense of this year's meetings has been that we have not really had an agenda that's headed anywhere. And from my perspective, that's a great way of losing attendance. And so if we do have an agenda that actually seems to be on track to getting something done, we are likely to get a better attendance.
Okay. Yeah, no, I hear that. And we've done that in the past. I don't think had the impact we were expecting, but we can certainly use that as another tool in the toolkit. So, but yeah, like I said, but between now and the 13th of next month, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that everybody attends, because that has unfortunately been an issue this year. Ms. Rusha.
Thank you. So I think that if I remember correctly, there are some websites that will kind of break down state by state some of the fees, but not all states charge the same fees. So for example, some states don't have an after hours fee. And then the other thing is that many states also have, like local, in some states it's all, it's pretty hyper local, like the regulations or maximum fees. So I was just going to, put out there maybe, or I guess I was going to ask, like, is there a particular thing that we want to look into, or just, does that make sense? Like, we want to look at like which states are doing this on a state level, like, and it's more universal. Do we want to look at, the fees that we have outside of the hook fee? That's just a kind of an open question, because I could see how even trying to like gather and then present the research could be an overwhelming project. You know what I mean? Because it's hundreds or thousands of, at least hundreds, of different rate structures we'd be looking at. Does that question was just kind of open to anybody, or I guess I was trying to get a better understanding of what Michael was saying, or Mr. Pierce. I agree that it would be beneficial for us to kind of do a comparative review. And so what I was trying to ask is, do we want to narrow it a little bit or just pick a place to start, recognizing that it is a lot of information?
Yeah. Well, if I could answer, just because that was my suggestion, I was just hoping to get a start on just seeing the difference between the states. And since I have not done any of that research myself, any nice starting place, especially if there's any web pages that does some comparative research, would be good. And then my approach would be to take that, any kind of helpful summary research that we might be able to be turned on to, then work from there as to what we would want to focus on as a group.
Okay. I do remember some websites and studies being linked that did a state-by-state comparison, and it, referenced a couple of rules, and then I think at least what the hook fee was for states that had, like a statewide, you know what I mean, like something more universal. Would that be a helpful place to start?
Yes, I think it would be good. Just for my own thinking, just so that you all know where I'm sort of headed with what I think we didn't do last year. One of the biggest charges in statute was for us to come up with rates that were based on comparing consensual and non-consensual. And one of the clearest points of comparison is the hook fee. And some of the issues that were brought up by Mr. Connolly and Mr. Forbes had to do with there being other expenses that are borne by carriers, by towers, that that need to be looked at, especially for non-consensual towers. And my sense was that we could still do a productive comparison, because right now, one of the things that did come up from our research was that the hook fee for consensual versus non-consensual, they are just miles apart. And it seemed to me like it would be helpful for us to just analyze whether or not it's appropriate to put in place the extra expenses that towers incur into the hook fee versus setting up extra charges for those extra expenses as separate lines, as separate charges that are charged to the non-consensual customer. So that's where I was headed, and I was hoping to see states trying to address something like that, if there are any who attempt to go in that direction. So that's one of the useful targets that I would like us to explore, if there's any data and any work in that direction.
So and I'm sorry, I don't mean to dominate the conversation, but I dug through some of this stuff, 18 months ago. So I want to be helpful and understand. So if I understand correctly, if we could find some data on just the average tow cost for consensual tows, whether it was national or regional or something like that, not our research, but trying to pull from another data point, that would be helpful. And then would it still be helpful to have, if something is out there, a state-by-state comparison on the non-consensual rates, maximum non-consensual rates? Did I hear that correctly? Because that information, the second one I know it might be a couple years old, but it'd be pretty close. And then the other one, just might be a little bit of digging, but to your point, we have to start at start somewhere. I know I did some of this and I have like a folder of a lot of things and a Google Doc somewhere. So I want to be able to help and send Mr. Riley anything I have to maybe lighten, you know, an administrative load if I can just share what I already did. So that's why I was asking for clarification, but I apologize. I didn't mean to.
I think any aggregated information is helpful. You know, it may be outdated, but it's still good. It still gives a reference point to work off of. So yeah, no, I think anything anybody in this group can add to the discussion, especially when it comes to something, you know, more tangible, like with numbers and that kind of backing, I think makes it even more helpful. Just because, you know, a lot of us are bringing our personal, you know, experiences in our specific role that we hold on the task force to a lot of these discussions, and that's good, and it's stuff we should definitely talk about. But you know, when it comes to presenting, especially like a monetary figure to the commission, saying these are what the rates should be, you know, it should, to the greatest extent possible, it should be based on, you know, data and analysis of that data. I think that's what holds a little bit more weight. So yeah, I agree with that. Captain Hahn, sorry, you've been waiting a while.
Yeah, no, that's okay. One of the things that, as I'm just listening to the conversation, it sounds like there's a lot of work that has been done with research already. I know, Nate, you talked about the handful of states that you had already contacted and reached out to. I'm wondering, I'm a visual person. Ms. Rusha has a file full of information on research that she's done. I'm wondering if it wouldn't be helpful to have maybe some sort of just a matrix document that lists different states, and just at a very high level, a summary document, a matrix that indicates, all right, in this state, you know, here's who regulates this. You know, here's how they determine rates. States that have done a comparison of consensual versus non-consensual, just so that we can, at a high level, start to see what information is already out there, and that can maybe inform some other discussions. And then from there, maybe we can then break down into smaller groups, little task groups to go out and to Mr. Pierce's point on comparing consensual versus non-consensual rates, as opposed to large group discussion to start the effort, rather grab a couple of people in smaller task groups to go and research that particular issue based on that summary document or that matrix, so at least where they know where to go, and then report back to the bigger group for further discussion. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but I've been involved in some other groups
You've got mail.
in my capacity with the agency, and where there's just a lot of different pieces and different things that need to be researched, and I've found it really helpful to have on a single document, a spreadsheet that just indicates what's already out there and where, and then breaking it up into more bite-sized pieces for people. I don't know, I'll just throw that out there for consideration. And then also, I mean, you know, Nate, I know you've, as you have a day job as well as the rest of us, right? There's not, I know you don't probably have all the time in the world to on your own do all of that research, but that would be my what I would throw out to the group, is that we at least get that in a summary document, high level, and then break up into smaller study groups or task groups to unpack some of these issues.
Yeah, what's one thing I've learned, you know, over the years, because I've done a lot of little mini research projects like this, where, you know, people are asking questions about, well, what do they do in other states? You know, in Colorado, are we the only ones that regulate things this way? You know, and sometimes we are, but I'd say more than half the battle in a lot of these research projects I've conducted in the past is finding the right person to talk to in these out-of-state areas. You know, going through the phone trees of all their different, you know, high-level departments, and finally getting to the right person to have that conversation with and ask those kinds of questions. That's half the battle. And like I said, I have done that recently with with towing, not on this specific issue. It's something else I was exploring, but I did get a handful of names in some other states of people that I'd be comfortable reaching out to and speaking to, just to get a feel for what other states are doing, or at least they can, you know, send me to their website. I know our rates are up on our website. But other states, you know, I would hope would do the same thing. But, you know, sometimes you'll look on it somewhere and you'll be like, really, that's the price? And you call somebody and they're like, oh, that's not the price anymore. It's this. And so again, you got to talk to the right people. It's, you know, you can find a lot of good info online, but what I've learned over the years is that usually if you can just find that right person, you can get all your questions answered and then some. So that's half the battle, is finding that person. So.
That makes sense.
Ms. Rusha.
Thank you. So, so maybe it would be too much of a jump to do a 50 state comparison, but, and I don't know if this is a question that you could answer, Nate, or, I don't know, there's someone in the, I don't know, one of our state economists or just a department, but like, since we're also talking about like inflation and cost of living and stuff like that, do we have what we would call like peer states in that way? Do you know what I mean? Because does that make sense? Like, so, and then maybe, and then a few others that also might have a similar regulatory structure, and that could just be where we start, you know? I don't know what they would be, but I don't know if that's like commonly, you know, done, because we're also talking about like economies of scale. We're talking about, you know, local wages, we're talking about CPI. So I don't know if that's something that would help us narrow down, and this is just a start, but like kind of narrow down this, you know, a list for the states we would start with. I mean, it's always
Sure.
going to be a little bit apples to oranges, you know, but I don't know if that helps for considering where we, you know, this conversation is probably going to go, you know, and we've talked a lot about like indexing rates. So I just wanted to put that out there and see what your thoughts were, if that made it more complicated or maybe simpler.
So what I did when I did this recent research project is, and again, I was not looking at, you know, rates. It was something completely different, but it did involve towing. So it's really one of the first windows I've had to see and look through in regards to towing regulations in other states. I don't know that I've ever done that personally before, but I was able to get that. What I used to decide which states to call, because obviously I didn't have time to call 50, but I narrowed it down to about a dozen states that I thought were fairly comparative to Colorado, at least in regards to the extent to which towing is regulated in these different states. And what I did to determine that is they did a study. It was I think it's a nonprofit. It's USPIRG. And they created a study back in, I think it was May of 2021, where they kind of did some kind of study-based analysis on the different, and they actually did all 50 states, of kind of some certain basic consumer protections within the towing industry in all these various states. And so I looked through their analysis and kind of picked the 12 states that I thought aligned best with what we have here. So that's kind of the guide I used. Yep, that's it. So anyway, I did review that and try to figure out which states, and I actually downloaded the whole report, which is there on there. But yeah, I ended up just looking. There was like an appendix that had like little tables of all 50 states, and it just, each table had like a little list of like the, I don't know, 10 most important consumer protections for towing consumers. And so I went down the list and picked the ones that I thought were most comparative to Colorado. And those are the 12 states that I reached out to. Now I was only able to get a hold of like 8 or 9 of them, because sometimes people just, you can't get to the right place as hard as you try. But yeah, no, that's how I started. And so that kind of reduced the workload a little bit and gave kind of a window into how other states might do it. You can always expand it. Like for example, I didn't call Wyoming or Utah. They weren't two of the states that I contacted, but they're immediately adjacent to our state. But at the same time, you know, they obviously are going to have differences in regards to, you know, just how their state is laid out. We're obviously much more populated here in Colorado, and economically, I'm sure, vastly different. So, you know, those are all things you got to take into consideration when talking about this kind of stuff. All right. Any other thoughts by anyone?
Well, one thing that I was hoping to do just to kickstart some talk, Ms. Rusha, you mentioned you had a folder of stuff. I'm curious if it would help for if you had any kind of a summary or some helpful summaries you might be able to distribute in advance.
If I may, yeah, I will go back and I'll go back and look. I mean, some of it is sort of what Nate talked about, like just the consumer protection and just the regulatory, and a little less on the fees. But I don't know. Would we be able to do a Google Doc and drop information in there, Nate? Is that a way to share?
So we have, because we've kind of done something similar in the past.
Yeah.
Last year, what we ended up doing is we have, so our website, the Towing Task Force website, everything that's up there right now is contained within folders on a Google Drive that we have here at the PC. And so not everything is visible, but I mean, it always can be if we decide to put it out there. But for the most part, yeah, we could easily I could create a new folder and just make sure everybody has access to it. It's not that difficult.
Because I would be happy to take the links and stuff that I have and, you know, put it into a Google Doc or into someone else's and, you know, link it correctly, format it correctly, and put a little descriptor in there. But I just don't want to copy things that Nate might also be doing or somebody else. And so that's why I thought maybe, I don't know if we have a group Google Doc, maybe with some categories, and we just start sharing information that way. But I'm absolutely happy to pull together what I have. I feel like probably a lot of what I have is what Nate has, or, you know, there's probably a lot of overlap, and I would love to help. You know, I would love to help. So maybe, so I'm volunteering. So Nate, if you want to talk offline, maybe you can just, you know, convey to me what would be helpful from an administrative standpoint, and then I can, you know, volunteer, take the time and do that. So I'm not duplicating, or we're not duplicating each other's efforts, and I also don't want to create more work for you too, you know? So whatever is the best process.
It's not a problem. If you want to just email me what you have, that's fine. And then like I said, I can add it as part of prepping for the next meeting. I can put it all somewhere where people can have access to it. And just so we're clear, Mr. Roberts, this is usually part of a folder that is accessible through the website, so anybody can see it. So it's not like we're trying to hide anything. That's how we've tended to do it in the past, is we just attach it in the same place where we hold the agendas and the minutes. So it's usually just in that same folder. So yeah, if everybody's comfortable with that, like I said, Ms. Rusha, if you want to just email me what you have, I can just dump it into that area, which will be accessible as part of the website. And I can make sure everybody has access to that before our next meeting, just in case they want to take a look beforehand before we potentially would discuss it. But yeah, I think, you know, pulling from work and data that's already done is always much more time efficient. So yeah, if you just want to send me what you have, I can upload it all and it's there. And if there's some overlap, that's fine. I'm not too worried about that.
All right. So I'll do that, and then I'll either put it in a Google Doc and send it over, or I'll just make a folder, you know, with the state email address and just share it with you, and then you can take whatever you need from it. I would also just, whether it'll be this meeting or next meeting, I'm also happy, because I brought it up, to volunteer to just look at like any other data, you know, about like if we wanted to look at AMI or whatever, because I was talking about, cost of living comparison. And so that stuff is easily available online. I can pull that. So if the group has an interest, then I would be happy to also share some other areas or states that we can look at that look similar to the Denver metro. I know this is statewide, but I do feel like our current rates reflect more Denver metro than say Pueblo. But again, wherever we want to start, I'm happy to do that too, just for just in case we want that for the future. But I won't go and do it if it's not an interest, but I'm happy to do it and then share the information with Nate if it is. Bueller, anybody?
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite.
Like, if it's not,
I didn't quite catch what that last bit of information was.
I'm not sure. Oh, so I was just saying, like, okay, so we've talked about, like, looking at other states and what they do and what they charge, but not all states, like their economies are widely different, and like AMI might be widely different, right? And so if we have also talked about, is CPI the best measure, or, these other like tools to sort of figure out what's appropriate in terms of charging, then I was thinking when we do look at other states, we should consider, and Nate obviously already has, but we should, kind of consider like what their economies are like. And so I was just offering, if there was an interest, we can just start with like AMI or something. Like I can go and get some data, like regional data, right? That of areas that are very similar to, Denver, Lakewood. What is the third leg of that we usually use, Nate? You know what I'm talking about? Like I can go and I can pull that and just put it in a chart or something, if that is helpful.
So it's Denver, Aurora, Lakewood.
Denver, Aurora, Lakewood. Yeah,
that's the CPI we use for
Yes.
the inflation.
I thought it was Aurora, but I was
Denver, Aurora, Lakewood. Yep.
Yeah. So I could find other areas in the states, right? Other regions, right, that have similar, like economic, you know what I mean? Like, does that make sense? Like similarities in terms of like AMI or some other like economic measure, you know what I mean? And then if those states are not currently on a list, we might want to consider adding them, right?
Right.
Or not. But
That sounds helpful to me.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, anything to make our approach more targeted, I think, is helpful. Because, like I said, back in 2015, when the towing task force at the time came up with their recommendations, they essentially looked at Utah, and that's almost all they used, from what I can tell. So I don't know that we have to be so narrow. I think we can maybe look at a handful of states. We don't want to go overboard, but I think trying to pin down exactly what other states are the most comparative to what we have here in Colorado, and nothing's going to be exactly alike, but we can kind of try to make some at least decent comparisons to how it's set up in other states and kind of what they're charging, why they're able to charge what they're charging, those types of things could definitely give us a little bit of direction here.
So I have a question, and it's not meant to like derail this conversation, but we've talked about it before. Like, I think so. Like this task force can also make recommendation like regarding like regulations if asked. And I don't know if that is something. I don't know if I'm putting the cart before the horse, but I guess like I don't know if that is something that we want to consider, not in the next month, but in the next several months or whatever, looking at too. Because in my analysis, like I found some areas where, if a towing operator took your car like illegally, then they would have to pay fee, right? Fine. And then like a chunk of that was remitted to the victim. You know what I mean? Like things like that too. So I'm sure that played into other jurisdictions' calculations when they were determining what their rates were. I mean, do you
Maybe.
say, like,
It's-
and I'm not saying like we have to get into that like right now, but I don't know if any of that, like, if I come across that info, do you want me to share it? We don't have to
Well-
make it a discussion item, but
Yeah, no, I think I hear what you're getting at. So just so everybody's clear, here in Colorado, we have one of our rules. It's Rule 6511G currently, and what it says is that if a towing carrier performs a tow in violation of one of our commission rules or a state statute or something like that, basically if they've committed any kind of a violation in association with a particular tow, and we hear about it and we see it, and we have evidence to support that violation is likely to have occurred, then they actually can't keep any funds associated with that tow whatsoever. So, and that's just part of our basic consumer protection outline here of our rules. So it's a feature we've had as part of our rules for as long as I can remember. And so with a lot of the towing cases that we work, if we work them on our investigators identify a violation, one of the first things they do is they ask that towing carrier to refund the tow. If there was money that was exchanged for that tow, that's one of the first things they ask. Or if the towing carrier still has the vehicle, they request that the towing carrier release the vehicle at no charge. So that's a pretty standard consumer protection we've had in place for many, many years. So that may be, I'm not sure to what extent that may have been considered when the current framework for fees and charges under our Rule 6511 was created or reconfigured back in 2015, 2016. But it's a good point. I don't know if it was considered or not, but I do know that's been a feature in our rules for, like I said, probably at least the last 10 years.
And I'm sorry, I should have been more clear. I wasn't suggesting that we didn't have that consumer protection layer, but there's been discussion of, what other kind of information points are helpful. So if we do end up creating a matrix, I don't know if it's like a box we want to check, in a Excel sheet or something. So, but to that end, that reminds me, like, I don't know if it's San Francisco or if it's the state of California, but I know at least in San Francisco, like, if you are low income and participate in certain programs, like, you can get like certain fees waived, like administrative fees and things like that. So it like can reduce your bill. That's not something we have here, but that's just something to consider because it, there in some areas, there is a mechanism to like adjust the standard fee based, on income status, right? So that that would be like the kind of thing I would, when I've come across it, I would note, and that might not be very common, but some jurisdictions have programs like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to be fair, the new statute from last year, or the new statutes from last year, one of the provisions is that some people were initially calling it a reduced fee release, but that suggests there's some kind of a discount. So we've been calling it a release without full payment provision is what we've been calling it. And that's when, and this is mostly set up for residential style private property impounds. So residential non-consensual tows, those being ones that come from, apartment complexes and mobile home parks and those types of areas, where they can essentially have the vehicle released for a lesser fee. They still owe the full balance, but they can get the vehicle out for either 15% of the overall fees or $60, whichever is less. So yeah, we do have something like that here now, which went into effect last year. So it's been in effect for actually a year tomorrow. It'll have been in effect for a year tomorrow. So, and towing carriers have struggled with that. And I know they potentially would use that new provision that they'd have to adhere to now, for the past year as potential justification for why the fees should be increased rather than decreased. But anyway, that's a separate conversation. All right. Well, if nobody has anything else, I definitely appreciate everybody's conversation today. Like I said, we are set up for our next meeting on September 13th, also a Wednesday, also 2 o'clock. So between now and the 13th, I'll go ahead and take your suggestion, Dr. Pierce, about putting together kind of an advance agenda. Maybe I'll play in some more discussion in that agenda about, exploring other states and rates in other states and kind of how they're configured. So to kind of keep things interesting and promote more individuals to participate. And like I said, I'll do everything I can behind the scenes as well to make sure that as many people as possible attend the meeting next month, because I agree, we got to get the chair issue sorted out as soon as possible. And then in the meantime, Ms. Rusha, if you want to send me whatever you have, I can add that to the list as well as a potential talking point, or at least documentation to review, as that can be added to the discussion for next month's meeting.
Awesome. And then for everyone else on the call, I put a couple of those links in the chat if you don't have your chat box enabled right now. So I put in the PRG study and then the San Francisco rate reduction program. But Nate has the first, and I'll make sure I email the second one to you, Nate. But just in case anybody was interested, there's a couple of resources right there on your screen. In the meantime,
It's interesting. Yeah, I'm looking at the San Francisco one. That's interesting. First time tow. Huh. Interesting. Yeah, it's it must be a municipal thing.
it is, and San Francisco is very serious about the parking. but it's just it's just kind of a it's just something to consider. Even if we don't do that, like other jurisdictions that regulate towing in similar ways have also considered people's income. So I don't know if that's something that we might want to study in the next couple months, or have a discussion item, but I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, well, and that's something. It's interesting to see it set up in a way where they have to kind of demonstrate kind of a need to participate in this, because that's something we don't have currently in the statute for the mechanism that I mentioned about getting your vehicle out for a lesser fee. There's nothing in the statute about who qualifies for it. It seems like it's just open to anybody, regardless of if they could pay the whole bill on the front end or not. So interesting.
Well, and I guess like the protection that we have is not means tested, right? But you still have to pay the full bill at some point.
True.
Right?
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, and then San Francisco, and again, like this is a smaller jurisdiction. In terms of geography, right? There's I think you have to produce your Medicaid card or a WIC card or some if you're already enrolled in a benefits program, then and it's only for the first time tow. So again, that's something that maybe would not be feasible statewide, but it's just to kind of point out that other jurisdictions have just taken into account, the equity piece, and how losing your car, how devastating that can be for lower income folks. And then to that end, maybe we also, since I'm going to pull the information anyway, I can also just look at when we look at, inflation or AMI, again, our rates are for the whole state, right? But Pueblo, Montrose, Greeley or whatever, that's different. And that might be more of a burden on people in the rural areas. So maybe that's something that we can also discuss in the future. I certainly understand it's easier to just have a flat state rate, but I don't know. Maybe that's a comparative analysis. Are there other states that have regional rates? And if I could see why not, but I could also see why it could be justified. So that's something maybe we kind of do that a little bit, with the mileage, right? Like we kind of say, like after you can only like charge for so many. Was it the first 10 or first 12 or something miles or something?
Yeah, it's 10. I believe it's 10 miles, or actually it might be 12. Yeah, it's all in relationship to how close you are to I-25, and I want to say it's like either 10 or 12, and then like 16.5 on the farther end.
So, but anyway, I'm happy to. I'll start in collecting the info I had from year and a half ago, and I'll send it over. And then I'm happy to do, collect anything else as it relates to inflation or AMI. I just need a little bit more direction on, what folks want. But I apologize again for being late. I got stuck in transit. My phone was dead, so I couldn't even, dial in. But I appreciate the opportunity to still participate, and I'm happy to do some homework before the next meeting. Just let me know.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you, volunteering your time for that. I know everybody appreciates it. Okay, well, thanks everybody. So like I said, our next meeting is scheduled for the 13th. I'll try to get that invite out here shortly. So just mark your calendars, September 13th, Wednesday, 2 p.m. So it will be our next meeting. And like I said, I'll probably be circulating 1 or 2 different emails about it prior to that meeting, just encouraging people to come and, circulating the agenda. I'll try to get that done in as much advance as possible to, again, try to get as many people next time to attend so we can get a new chair and everything else we need to work on. So, all right. Well, thanks everybody. It's about almost 3:30 now. About 3:25. So thanks everybody for coming, and have a good rest of your day, week, and month.
Thanks
Thanks everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thanks all.